Welcome to Drinks Coach at Vinesack and at Drinks Coach UK if you're following Instagram or Twitter. We're getting our stuff together. Bit of moody music, I think. People have mentioned that the music might actually help things go with a swing. So there we go. Right, my first 10 minutes on Australian Shiraz to a video camera starts now. So, why did I pick this? Well, Tesco's very kindly sent me some wine, and in it there happened to be 3 different wines from South Australia from 3 subtly different areas. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about something which I really cut my teeth on, that really got me into wine, really, and that's Aussie Shiraz, good old-fashioned South Australian Shiraz. Now, what is Shiraz? Well, Shiraz is a red grape. Can be used in a million different ways, and one of the reasons why it was planted so heavily in South Australia is because it makes exceptionally good port and sherry type wines. So when we didn't have refrigeration, when a lot of the wines were fortified, Shiraz was a bit of a winner. But it also makes big, rich, savoury wines. Almost all of the really truly great wines in Australia are Shiraz based. Let's take Grange, for example, Bin 95 from Penfolds, probably the most famous wine in the Southern Hemisphere. It's made from South Australian Shiraz. Now, we've got 3 different parts of South Australia featured here. We have Barossa Valley, which is probably the most famous region for Shiraz. Giant agricultural area with some young vines and some very, very, very old vines in a large area. As you go up there's some slightly higher altitude areas. You get into places like Eden Valley and so forth, where the wines change in their character somewhat. Then we're going to go on to a wine which is from further inland, more what we call continental. If you go further north, you're almost going up to about 2,000 feet, I believe. And you're going further away from the sea, so you get much, much hotter days and much, much, much colder nights. And this, what we call diurnal temperature variation, this massive swing of maybe 25, 30 degrees centigrade during the day, allows wines to have lots of amounts of concentration, lots of aroma, but also to keep and retain acidity. Then finally, we're going to wine from one of the most famous producers of Shiraz in Australia, Darren Berg, which comes from about half an hour's drive south of Adelaide, right on the coast, in Port Wollonga. McLaren Vale is the region we're talking about here. Very, very nice place to hang out. And some of the finest Shirazes and Cabernets in all of Australia come from this small region, and there are some spectacularly good vineyards down there. So without further ado, we've got a few minutes to talk about these wines. Let's start with this. This is made by a guy called Stephen Tierney at Limestone Coast Wines. This is made as a special bespoke one-off Tesco's finest wine. Limestone Coast, in fact, isn't from that area of Adelaide or Barossa, just further north. A lot of wineries are producing wines all over Australia from vineyards which the fruit may be 9 or 10 hours away in temperature controlled tanks, or even flown in some cases. Limestone Coast wines are actually down near Coonawarra, further down, probably a 2 or 3 hour drive south of McLaren Vale around the coast, and you get to Mount Benson, Rattenbully, Mount Gambier, Coonawarra pathway, that area, and they're very famous for making beautiful Cabernets, Cassis Blackcurranty, probably the most quintessential New World Cabernet on the market, and some of them are very pricey indeed. That's the Limestone Coast, but these guys also have bespoke vineyards and contracts everywhere, and they made this wine for Tesco's. Colour-wise, quite dark in colour. These wines tend to be quite high in alcohol. If you compare Shiraz to where it originated from, which is not France, but in fact Persia, from Iran, from the town of Shiraz, during one of the Crusades, I don't remember which, second or third, who's counting, one of the Knight Templar brought back these vines and planted them on a hill in the southern part of France, southeast France, at a place called Tain-l'Hermitage, on a hill where he built a chapel. So the vineyard is actually called Hermitage, which was the old name for Shiraz in France, La Chapelle, and that wine is a £200 bottle of wine now. Those cuttings were taken in the 18th century, late 18th century, by a viticulturalist to Australia and planted in Barossa Valley and the Hunter Valley. So the actual very same vegetable matter, the same genetic material that was taken from Shiraz, that planted one of the oldest and one of the finest wines in France, is also responsible for some of the finest wines in Australia, which is wonderful. So you have a direct comparison between climate, soils and everything else. And in France, where they call it Shiraz, the wines tend to be 12.5 to 13% alcohol, much higher in acid, denser, more concentrated, need a lot more time. But in Australia, where it's much hotter, you have this wonderful, warming alcohol sweetness and almost a verging on kind of mulberry jam quality. Somebody once said that Barossa wine used to smell of rum and hamster cages. I think sanitation's improved a lot since then. Okay, so what have we got here? So wine's got lots of bright fruit, lovely cherry character, almost like a liqueur cherry, dusty, a little bit of cocoa powder, a little chocolate. Not as concentrated as some of the best wines in Australia, but who's counting? £8. That's £8, and actually that tastes like proper wine. There's no real sweetness, no residual sugar, which you find often in a lot of cheap branded Australian wines. This wine has nice balance, good acidity, not bad at all. Moving on to a wine which we've been able to buy from Tesco's, I think for about 30 years. I followed him way before, even before he was selling wine to the supermarkets. And he started in 1985 as a young winemaker, making 30, 40 tons of wine. Now he makes nearly 1,000 tons of Shiraz a year, and he's a very successful man making beautiful wine. He has his oldest vineyard, in fact, the Aberfeldy vineyard, was planted in 1904. He has Scottish descent, and I used to enjoy meeting him in Edinburgh and going for drinks with him. But Tim Adams is truly one of the best valley winemakers in Australia. This is from Clare Valley, as I said, which is further north. If you drive about 2.5 hours north of Adelaide, right up into the uplands, where it's cold enough at night that you can grow Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, very cool varieties. But also you can make these bruiser big Aussie Shirazes. This wine's 14.8% alcohol, but when you smell it, there's not a hint of jam there. The wine's lovely and soft. These wines have been aged for 12 to 24 months in American oak barrels, but none of them are new, which gives a lovely, soft, gentle edge to the wine. It's almost Beaujolais juicy. You would never know this wine was packed from arsehole to beak with alcohol, but it is. And a wine that's delicious. They've been selling the wine in the supermarket since 1990, early 1990s, and long may he continue to make great wines. Moving on to the last one, we've got a couple more minutes. This wine is from Darren Berg, which is a vineyard which was set up, a winery was set up in 1881 by Joseph Osborne, the great-grandfather of the current winemaker, Chester Osborne, who's a total legend. He looks a bit like Tim Finn, the old dude, the brother of Neil Finn in Crowded House, got slightly wavy blonde hair, and is just a righteous dude and makes great wine. They've stuck to their guns with old-fashioned winemaking, and this wine is still bought from newer acquired vineyards and younger vines. But some of the vines which he uses, even in this, what is essentially his entry-level Shiraz, these wines do include grapes from vines that are over 100 years old, what we call museum vineyards, which is extraordinary. Then the grapes are foot-trodden, yes, still foot-trodden, and then put into American vats and French oak vats for a little while to finish off. And so this wine is using the same techniques they did all the way back when, and it just proves that wine is not made in a winery, it's made in a vineyard. It's how good the grapes were to start with. Now, this isn't going from Adelaide north into Australia towards the opal mines in Coober Pedy or Ayers Rock. It's going south. We're actually on the beach near Port Willie, Port Wollonga, and this is Henley Beach. This is McLaren Vale, one of the most famous areas. It's where Hardy's set up. In fact, Joseph Osborne started off working for the Hardy's company back in those days, and has continued to produce incredible wines. I've drunk the wines which were just made in concrete, made by this guy, Footbolt Shiraz or Darry's Original, from the 60s, and they still taste incredible. These wines age brilliantly. Just to give you an idea of price here, these wines aren't necessarily the total top echelon of wines, although the wines from these estates at the top are. The first wine's £8, the second one £10, and the third one here £12, £11.99, unless you buy it before the 13th of April, when it's a tenner as well. This is ridiculous wine for a tenner. Beautiful colour. It's got a wonderful magenta mulberry inkiness to it. It's got almost seashells. There's a minerality which must come from the soil. got a savoury thyme gravy quality. Just put a little bit into your hot pot, and no one will be upset by that. Give it a sniff, taste. You can still buy wine that good from Australia for a tenner. They've got an incredible exchange rate. They must be making this for nothing. But I suggest you go out and buy this. For a tenner, it's fantastic. That wine will keep in a rack for 5 to 10 years. What can I say? Absolutely delicious wine. Savoury. Maritime, because it's made by the sea. It's got much softer silkiness. So we've got Barossa fruit, almost plonk drinking price. £8 is a really, really decent wine. Then we've got a wine with refreshment and concentration and acidity from Clare. And then we finished off with the McLaren Vale Classic, the Footbolt, which, by the way, was the name of a horse, which did so well in the races. It actually paid for his winery. But there we go. If you like Shiraz, you probably enjoyed this. If you don't like Shiraz, you probably switched off about 3 minutes ago. Until next time.